Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge Friday night edition. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. It's good to see everybody. I have a really, I don't know, it might just be complete nerd kind of, nerdgasm kind of thing, but I have a really interesting tale to tell tonight, and I think, if I've kept any of my skills, I can make it interesting for everybody because I think most people are going to be really, really interested in it. It's just absolutely to me, mind-boggling study that came out and regards AI, and probably not in the way that you think. Give me 1 second just to cool it down just a little bit in here. It's a little bit warm. Hang on 1 second. But as usual, we'll let the room fill up just a little bit. We'll let the kind of warm up the engine a little before we get to the first race, first motor race. We did the show tonight because a bunch of us went out last night to see Superman. Jeremy Boring's in town. Haven't seen him in years in person. And he's a huge Superman fan. So we went to see Superman last night. I'll save the review about it till Monday, because I reckon by Monday I might have recovered the will to live. But yeah, we'll get to that on Monday. But it's certainly an interesting time and a lot of stuff going on. So let me just get my windows rearranged here. I pulled a couple of slides to show you. So we have visual aids, remember back in the days we were old campers, where we when there would be days where you'd get a film in high school or middle school or elementary school, but especially middle school because that was a special kind of torture. Yeah, my music volume is probably too high. I'm almost pegged on the mic volume. Yeah, Jeremy seems to be doing well. And they'd roll out the cart, with the 16 millimeter projector, and then guys like me would get up there and thread that projector, and we'd run a film, and the teachers would say, amuse them, confuse them, or show them a film. That was a teaching motto back in the 70s and the 80s. But anyway, you get the idea. The overhead projector with the grease, with the acetate pages and the grease pencil and stuff. My God. And the thing also that was really fun were the mimeos. When they would do tests on they print out, this is before photocopy machines, if you can believe such a time ever existed. They would type things on this on the sheet of paper and had like purple underneath it. And then they'd put that purple thing on a drum and they'd douse it with this chemical and they'd run it off. And you'd get these things that looked like photocopies, except they were purple ink. And they all had that alcohol smell, and everybody would sniff them, as Castellan said. I think there's a moment like that in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which will mean nothing to anybody. But those, yeah, there was something about that alcohol kind of smell that was, whatever they used for that was just great. Yeah, everything is going well. Fire Waco said, smelled so good, like raw cancer. And I love those purple letters too. I thought that was cool. Eric Blake says, what a time to sniff glue. He's right about that. I built so many models when I was a kid. I can't tell you, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of models. Usually 1/72nd scale jet models. But I built everything. And then I think maybe like at the absolute end of my model building days, like the absolute end, they changed the glue formula because people were sniffing glue and getting high off of it. So they changed it. And all I remember is that new glue was worthless. It just worthless. The testers, right? Testers, the red and white tube. Just nonsense. The original glue actually welded the plastic together. I mean, you got some glue on the outside of the model or something, and it would just, you'd see it just softens the plastic. But man, I built a lot of those models. So there's that. Um, I don't know. I don't want to, hold on too long because I get to the questions and see all the rest of that stuff. I'm sure we got a lot to talk about. I don't want to cheat any of the questions. It's been a it's been a very distressing couple weeks for many of us in the MAGA movement. It's kind of almost unbelievable. Some people are taking it more seriously than others, but I just find myself, kind of just heartbroken. Just I don't even want to go as far as saying betrayed, although that thought occasionally comes to mind. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions about this in the comments, so I don't want to cheat that too much because I do have something I want to talk about before we get rolling. But man, it's hard. It's hard to watch. Really, really hard to watch, and especially now that it's taken them 2-3 weeks, but the left is just pouncing all over this now, and it just looks like the Republicans are, protecting pedophiles, and it's just God Almighty. I've never. This is obviously the consequences are not the same, but this is almost like a to me looks like a Afghanistan level bungle. But Eric says, meanwhile, this week new polls came out and Trump's GOP approval has gone up. I, for the life of me, will not understand how that's possible. But Eric said, to his credit, that he said the whole thing is a tempest in a teapot as far as people online, that most people don't care about these things, and looks like he's right. But it sure knocked the wind out of some of my sails. And yeah, Dave's Reels Area 51 says, well, we had a good 6 months. It just I'm sure it'll be in the question section, so we'll get to that. And right now, like I said, I'm just kind of letting the room settle down and people realize that the stream is on and all over this. Spindy says the left is pouncing all over this because our side is handling this like a bunch of little bitches, and I'm counting on the administration and I'm counting both the administration and the so-called influencers. Yeah, so we'll see. Chuck Vanelli on YouTube says, I'm 40 and have been following politics since high school. The Republicans have always snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. So anyway, yeah, it's I think the one thing that, and again, we'll save most of this for the comment section, but just as another stalling tactic for a few more minutes, I think there's no question that the thing has taken on a size out of proportion to what it maybe was. But if you follow it to its logical conclusions, this idea of a two-tiered justice system and a group of untouchable elites essentially destroys the entire American idea. I mean, really. So we'll see. Catherine McChesney says, why don't you move out of California, Bill? Because California hasn't really touched me. I live in a little piece of Idaho right in the middle of the San Fernando Valley. And until it gets there, I'm just going to stay where I spent 25 years in Florida, more, at least that. And when I got off, I went back a year ago in April, took the red eye, and I got out of the airport at Orlando at about 5:30 in the morning, and I went outside, and I could feel the algae starting to grow on me. Just feel it. I was like turning into one of those creatures, like that creature that Stephen King played in whatever that movie. Is it one of those compilation films? I just could feel it. It's like, oh God. So right now it's just pretty out here, and I like it here, and I like the studio, and my much more to the point, my wife really likes it out here, and so I think I really don't think that is something I've talked about very much, but it's a big part of it, and I don't blame her. So there we go. All right. Anyway, I guess I'm about ready to go. Florida and California weather is exactly the same, says Roadrunner, except for the humidity, the hurricanes, the thunderstorms. Don't forget the mosquitoes, and the palmetto bugs and the state troopers underneath every overpass and all the rest of it. But yeah, it looks like Florida would be the second choice. It's I know I'm not going to be moving anywhere cold anyway. My beautiful wife is from Siberia, so and then Sochi, which is actually pretty nice, and Moscow, which gets really cold. So she's had enough cold. I've had enough heat, but you get the whole thing. Anyway, all right. So we'll get back to this stuff, I'm sure, when we get to the comments. But let me start my interesting tale here. It's got. I know this is going to come as a tremendous shock to people, but it's a really recent study. I found out about it yesterday. I need to find this guy's channel because I need to give him credit for this. Hang on a second. And it concerns. Are you shocked? Concerns AI, but hang on. Let me find this guy. Yeah, he's got a channel called Discover AI, and a couple days ago, I saw it last night. He put out a video, and here, so we're gonna start a story. Okay, here's the story. Back in the early Renaissance, let me find out. So in the early 1600s or so, somewhere around there, we had known for a long time that the planets move across the background stars. We didn't have a model of the solar system. Not much earlier than that, Copernicus was the first sort of modern guy to formulate a heliocentric system. The Greeks had a heliocentric system as well, but Copernicus gets the credit for relatively modern European history. And he was in the late 1500s, I want to say. So Copernicus says the sun is at the center of the universe, not the Earth, and we can explain the motion of the planets by this model. Now that ran into a lot of opposition, but one of the problems with the planets was that their motion across the sky, their motion across the star field, the stars are essentially infinitely further away, is irregular. And sometimes, depending on the planet, it's insane. For example, every couple years, Mars would stop moving forward in the normal direction, which would be west to east. Mars would actually stop against the planets, and then it would kind of come back, and then it would sort of go backwards. It's called retrograde motion, and then it would go forward again. Excuse me one second. There's somebody here I just need to take care of here. Nope. Hang on a sec. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So far so good, right? Here we are now. Along comes an astronomer named Kepler, Johannes Kepler. And Kepler is able to look at the positions of these planets, and he's able to figure out that the reason that the motions are irregular is because the planets are not moving in perfect circles. He's trying to predict the position of the planets because he's trying to understand the relationship of how the planets work. And so Kepler, who follows Copernicus, Kepler believed that the orbits of the planets had to be perfect circles, because Kepler was a deeply, deeply religious man, and he was 100% sure that God wouldn't put planets moving in anything other than perfect circles. Why would God put planets in something as imperfect as an ellipse? But to Kepler's great credit, and this is one of the great cases of scientific integrity in the history of science, Kepler looked at the positions of the planets and said there's only one way to explain these motions, and that is that they are moving in ellipses. Now, the thing about the ellipse is, when you get closer to the sun, the planets would speed up, and then when you get further away, they would slow down, and then they come around and then they speed up. And we're pretty used to seeing this kind of motion: slow, and then faster, 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 then slower, 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 then faster, faster, faster. So Kepler was able to look at the position of the planets, and he was able to derive his laws of planetary motion, which basically said that a planet will cover the same area in a certain amount of time. So even though the planet's further away and it's moving more slowly, it's covering a bigger slice of pie. So Kepler is able, and the Earth kind of lapping Mars was why Mars would look like it would go backwards. So Kepler comes along, and Kepler develops the laws of planetary motion that are absolutely astonishingly accurate at predicting the position of the planets within Newtonian physics, meaning taking away microscopic changes caused by relativity and all the rest of that stuff. Kepler is able to predict the position of the planets with a high degree of accuracy because Kepler understood the path that the planets take, okay? He understood the path that they take. But, what Kepler didn't know was why they were moving in those positions. He didn't know. So you have to go forward another, I don't know, let's just roughly say a century, okay, roughly, probably a little less than. So Kepler has derived the position of planets based on these ellipses, and he's got a good predictive model for the 5 planets that were visible to the naked eye, which is Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Okay, so far so good. But Kepler died not knowing why the planets moved the way they did. He only knew that this is how they move. This is the laws that he is able to observe, but he doesn't know why they move that way. He only knows that they do. So you have to wait another 70, 80 years or something, and along comes Isaac Newton, and Isaac Newton comes up with the laws of gravitation. So the laws of gravitation bind the planets into these ellipses that Kepler discovered, but Kepler never understood gravity. There was no theory of gravity. He had to wait 100 years for that. Okay? So far, so good. Now, here's where it gets really, really fascinating. I've been completely, well, obsessed is probably the right word, about this competition and cooperation between humans and AI, and we'll call it Team Carbon and Team Silicon. Okay, Team Carbon are carbon-based life forms like us, and Team Silicon will be the artificial intelligence, based on silicon chips and so on. Back and forth, back and forth. Now, as a quick aside, about a week ago, maybe a little bit longer, Elon Musk came out and said, we're releasing Grok 4 and Grok 4 Heavy, I think. And he said that Grok 4, there's apparently a test called, I think it's called the final human test or the final human exam. Basically, what it is it's a series of questions that present the test taker with the hardest questions that are solvable in any particular domain. So that would include a lot of mathematical questions. It include physical questions. It include all these different tests, right? It's sort of a benchmark for how well something understands, pretty much everything, right? Is it somebody will tell me, is it final human test, final human exam, something like that? FET, FEW, I don't remember. Hang on, where did I put my window for Twitch? There it is. Okay, ready? All right, here we go. Here's where it gets really, 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 really interesting to me anyway. Now, scientists at MIT and Harvard just released a paper, and they were trying to find out whether or not large language models actually think. Do they think? are they actually thinking? Are we seeing, in other words, are they conscious, and are they capable of intuitive, creative thought and breakthroughs? And so what they did to test this, what the guys at Harvard and MIT did to test this, was they took a large language model architecture and they trained it. Humanity's last exam, thank you, HLE. Thank you, Kirk. So they trained this LLM, which is the same architecture as Grok and ChatGPT and all the rest. They trained it, and they didn't get it worried about, all they taught it was mathematics and physics. That's all they taught it. And they asked it, and here's what they were trying to find out. They were trying to find out whether or not these large language models are Keplers or are they Newtons. A Kepler is capable of predicting something with a high degree of accuracy, but a Newton understands why the prediction will follow, right? Kepler observes the positions of the planets over time and is able to predict where they're going to be, but he doesn't know why they're going to be there because he doesn't understand the laws of gravitation. Newton not only knows where they're going to be, he knows why they're going to be there because he has basically formulated an extremely simple formula that determines what the force of gravity is, and that formula is double check it. I want to make sure you get it right. Is it force? Yes. So the force acting on a body is proportional to the mass of body 1 times the mass of body 2 divided by the radius between the two of them squared. F is proportional to m1 m2 divided by r squared. Okay, and that's simple, which means it's got to be true. E equals mc squared is simple too, and that's a sign that the universe is, if not designed, then fell into accident, into very elegant positions. And in fact, that's a conversation to have too. Okay? So it's a simple equation, it's a very simple equation. Force is proportional to mass of the first object times the mass of the second object divided by the square of the radius. Okay, so what they did was they gave this LLM the previous plotted positions of all of the planets with Mercury, Venus, and all the rest. Okay? It's here on this date, 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 it's here. They gave it what Kepler had, which is observations. Okay, so they asked it to predict where the planet is going to be next. And it turns out it did a pretty decent job of doing that. But it wasn't perfect. I know there's people saying there shouldn't be any math in this, but stay with me on this. Imagine a simple graph. I'll try and do this backwards if I can, okay? You got an x-axis and you got a y-axis. And you've got a series of data points. And data point 1 is 0, 0, which is the origin. Data point 2 is 1, 1. Data point 2 is 2, 4. Data point 3 is 3, 9. What is the fourth data point? If x equals 4, what is y? Now, even I know that if x is going 1, 2, 3, 4, and y is going 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, 9, then x is adding 1 and y is squaring the number. 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. So the point for 4 should be 4, squared 16, 416, right? You got an exponential growth line. Okay? Andrew, you won a prize. You got that first. Congratulations. When they gave this to the LLM, what they found was that the LLM was not able to devise the formula. The LLM knew that here's point 1, here's point 2, here's point 3, point 4 has to be somewhere along this line. And so the LLM would start kind of triangulating and messing around, and it would come out to be 16.01, or it would be 15.98, but it would never be exactly 16, because 16 is the correct number. The LLM would put that fourth point on something that looked like the correct line, but it never got it exactly right because it never was able to understand this very, very simple equation. So when they took a look at the LLM, now we get to go to some slides. When they took a look at the LLM and they asked the LLM to predict the position of Mercury, it was able, with relatively good accuracy, to predict the position of Mercury. But here's how it did it. I've got to drop these into both of them, so hang on a second. Okay, so on the left is the true force. This is on the left with the blue vectors. This is how the universe actually works. And on the left, the true force on Mercury is that there is a constant vector pointing towards the sun, and that vector is determined by force is proportional to mass 1 times mass 2 divided by radius squared. That's the blue lines on the left. The blue lines on the left is Newton's laws at work. Now the pink lines on the right are how the LLM predicted the next position in the sequence. It's called a token. So if you give it 300 tokens, here's 300 positions, what's the next token going to be? Where's the planet going to be next? And what the LLM did was it had to calculate something new every single time. So if it looked like the planet was getting like, it needs to be closer to the sun, let's say, because it's in that particular form of its parabolic or its elliptical orbit, then it puts this big vector saying, oh, you got to be closer to the sun. Then it looks at the next token and it realizes, no, my God, this thing is moving us way too close to the sun. We got to pull it further back out in order to get it to match the thing. So every single time it is approximating what vector needs to put it in the next place, but it never understands Newton's laws. It can never understand those. It's so critical. It's so critical to get. It doesn't understand them. It only approximates them. And that is really, really interesting. But that's just the beginning. Just for another example, here's I just showed you Mars and Mercury. No difference here. Here's what it did with Venus. Okay, so this is how the LLM predicted the position of Venus. Now, if you look at the orange circles, right, on the outside there, you'll see that the orange circles are where they're supposed to be. The prediction of the position of the planet is more or less where it's supposed to be, but the way it got there is got nothing to do with the underlying absolutely simple and elegant laws of gravitation that Newton discovered. So it's just approximating and using all kinds of different things to approximate. So here's what they did next. Next, they said, all right, we'll give you the fundamentals of, we're not just going to give you the position of where the planets are. We're going to help you out, LLM. We're going to give you a cheat. Here's the cheat. We're going to give you the mass of the sun. We're going to give you the mass of the planet. That's M1 and M2. We're going to give you the radius, and we're going to give you the starting velocity. Go ahead. And it couldn't derive Newton's law. It couldn't do it. Now, here's where it gets super fascinating. Then they said, okay, here's Newton's laws, right? F is proportional to M1 times M2 divided by radius squared. And once it had the law, perfect, absolutely perfect, 100%. But it was never able to understand the law. It never made the breakthrough that Newton made the breakthrough of. I've mentioned many times on my first chat with Grok, where I told it, I asked it to estimate my IQ, and it said between 115 and 135, something like that. I was just happy to be in triple digits, to be honest with you. I said, what do you suppose your IQ is, Grok? And it said, well, in some areas I'm infinitely fast, but I'd estimate it at 250 to 300. So Newton was one of the smartest men ever lived. I want to say he had an IQ about 190, 200, something like that, right? So this machine, which is at least considers itself to be faster than this, in which Elon Musk says is capable of getting 50-60% on humanity's final exam or whatever this thing is called, couldn't make the intuitive leap to derive the fundamental laws of nature that are underneath it. So here's this is kind of fun. I know we said there'd be no math, but here's how this LLM did when asked to predict all of the orbits of all the planets. And if you look down below, you'll see that in blue, all of those vectors are perfect radials because it's the law of gravitation. If you look at the ones on the right with the pink vectors, it's just doing nothing but endlessly trying to guess and approximate where that next token is. It does not understand it. It never was able to derive it. And what they were able to do with one of these, if you look at the up at the top right, the true force law, the actual law, the blue vectors is force is proportional to m1 times m2 divided by radius squared. They were able to recover what the AI was using. And what the AI was using was force is proportional to the sine of 1 over the sine of radius minus 0.024 plus 1.45 times 1 over 1 divided by the radius plus the mass of the second object, which is nonsense. It's just looking for whatever math it needs in order to put the next planet where it's supposed to be. All right, so just one more slide because I just love this stuff. They asked it to do the same thing with galaxies, okay? And here are the laws of physics that these LLMs came up with to explain the motion of galaxies. They gave it 5 different galaxies and explained the motions of the galaxies, gave it the motions of the galaxies and so on. And then they asked the LLM to predict. Remember, these are the things that are supposed to be smarter than any humans on Earth. They're supposed to be super genius IQs, and we're going to trust everything with them. And so they gave it these 5 galaxy problems and asked it to solve it. And what you see there is a ground truth law which explains the positions of the galaxies. And the ground truth law is Newton again, force is proportional to mass 1 times mass 2 divided by radius squared. The LLM for galaxy 1's motion said force is proportional to the sine of 1 divided by the sine of the radius minus 0.024 plus 1.45 and so on. And you look all the way down, look at galaxy 4. For galaxy 4, this brilliant super genius estimated that the mathematical expression for the motion of the galaxy was force is proportional to the sine of the radius plus 8569.2 plus 1 over 1 divided by mass of the first object. So what does all this really mean in terms of AI and large language models and where we are and artificial superintelligence and artificial general intelligence and all the rest of it? What it means is we are a long, long way away. It reinforces my original belief that we will never have actual artificial intelligence. Now, some people have said, well, no humans could have intuited what Newton did either, but what Einstein did is infinitely more complex than what Newton did. And Newton had the data. Newton had Kepler's data to do the work. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Then they said, okay, because these Harvard MIT scientists were constantly, I really appreciate this intellectual honesty. The people that did these papers said, okay, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. We'll give it the force and we'll give it the motions and the masses and so on. Couldn't derive it. It said maybe the problem is too difficult for the LLM to solve. Then they gave it Newton's equations and it did it perfectly. So then they said maybe our LLM isn't powerful enough. So finally they open up the experiment to things like ChatGPT 5 and the Gemini. I don't know if they use Grok 4 or not, but basically they opened it up to all of the LLMs. And even when it had access to the internet, where the Newtonian equations can be found by anybody, it still didn't have the sense to go and find Newton's equation. It just went and started to predict based on where the next pattern is going to be. So this is a blowout win. This is a 70-0 win for Team Carbon. And I listened to this guy's channel, and here's another little example. But it's important to understand what these LLMs are and what they're not. Just listening to this on the way in, he was talking about things like AI systems that can deal with like pharmaceutical doses and so on, looking for patterns. You input the patient's weight, you input their blood sugar, whatever. You put all this data in, right? And you let the artificial intelligence calculate what the dose should be and so on. And what they found was that sometimes they were getting some very, very squirrely answers. And what they did, 70-0 win for Team Carbon, P7 2017. We are able to make intuitive leaps and creatively disengage our brain from the immediate problem, which is, where is the next token going to be? Where is that planet going to be on the next tick of the clock? We're able to completely disengage that, go sit underneath an apple tree, watch an apple fall, and say, this can't do it. It can't do it. So what they found with this AI that was dealing with medication was they were getting some squirrely answers. And hang on to your hats, folks. It took them forever to figure out what the cause of it was, but what they found was that in a couple of cases, or a number of cases, somebody had input the data and they're typing, and they put 2 spaces after a period. Now, that's a grammatical rule. I don't use it, but some people do, and some software does. So when I finish, I've got period, space, new word. But some people would put period, space, space, new word. And what they found was, if somebody had entered data, like dosage data, and it put 2 spaces in there, the AI sees the 2 spaces before the actual data as a pattern and starts looking for that pattern. So it starts saying, okay, it's 2 spaces, 1 space, 2 spaces. What's the pattern for the 2 spaces? Well, there is no pattern for the 2 spaces. 2 spaces, they're empty spaces, not data. But the AI saw it because the AI is very good at recognizing patterns. So as this guy, I don't know his name, but the guy who has that AI channel that I mentioned, basically his entire argument, and I'm going to put this together into a firewall, into the same firewall with my dinner with Grok. But basically, what he's saying is that LLMs, which is what we're talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence, are Keplers. They're not Newtons. They're Keplers. And if you understand that, then you can have an understanding of the limitations of what this thing is, and use them because they are tremendously useful. They're very, very useful. But you also have to understand their limitations. And if you don't understand their limitations, we're going to make some big, big mistakes. Now, I think Quibo says AI innovators are Newtons. When you say AI innovators, are you talking about the scientists that are working on this? Because the scientists who are working on this are Newtons. There's no question about that. The reason they're able to build an LLM in the first place is because they are able to leave the problem and drop it and imagine a possible solution to this artificial intelligence problem. But AI itself doesn't have the ability to do this. It just doesn't. And they are finding more and more cases where the internal logic of the AI is inconsistent. Astronauts said, so LLMs will not be an Einstein to Newton. No, they apparently will not, based on this brilliant um, uh, set of experiments done by this Harvard and MIT AI team. There is no evidence at all. Not only is there no evidence that this thing will not be able to be like the next Einstein or the super Einstein that's going to get all of these breakthroughs in the worlds of physics. It will get them if it turns out that there's a pattern to the data, but it won't be able to. Albert Einstein came up with the rules of relativity while he was working at the patent office in Bern, Switzerland. He was just bored, and he was 19 or 20 or something like that. He's just bored, so he's sitting there with nothing to do, and instead of calculating, instead of getting out numbers and trying to predict why the orbit of Mercury is not quite where it's supposed to be, because by this point we know that Newton's a little off when it comes to Mercury, something is acting on Mercury, we didn't know what it was. So instead of sitting there with little data points and stuff and trying to predict why Mercury is not behaving the way Newton says it should, because Mercury is subject to very small but measurable relativistic effects. So instead of working on the problem that way, Einstein just sits there, puts his feet up on the desk, and says, what would happen if I'm traveling in a car at the speed of light and I turn my headlights on? What would happen if I was in an elevator that was accelerating upwards at 1G forever? What would happen? And this is something that these AIs not only cannot do, they not only can't do it, they can't picture it. Quibo says AI Innovator AGI is expected in 2030. Well, maybe, or maybe not. I still think that this innovator architecture is still going to be a form of, I just call it triangulation. Now, as it turns out, I have I'll close this little lecture with a personal story. When I was at the University of Florida in 1982, I got there in '79, so 1982 I think was my last year there, and I was doing work. What's that program called? Where you work at school for college credits. Watch it, Dave Big Boutte. University of Florida is an outstanding institution. Florida State is what you're talking about. So I'm in the office at the theater department. It's 1982 in Gainesville, Florida. And as usual, I've got, an work study, thank you. I've got an hour to kill, Matt, thanks, Matt. And really nothing to do. Now, as it turns out that the theater department had bought a computer, I think it was a TRS-80, and it had BASIC in it. And Dr. Wellberg, who was our technical director, was using this, and Dr. Wellberg taught me the basics of BASIC. So the first thing I did was I wrote a program that said enter name, print name. And I'd type in Bill, and it would go Bill on the screen. Fantastic. So that's the first software I wrote. The second piece of software that I wrote in BASIC was a solar system generator, because Bill. I wanted for playing Traveler, and just mostly because I wanted to do it, I wanted to create a program that would generate science fiction solar systems, which is pretty cool and pretty impressive. And it turns out that I did, and what came out looked really, really good. But this is where we get to the Newton versus the Kepler thing. I just have no math skills. I don't. So the way that I programmed this solar system calculator was I would determine, I just have a random number generator, and I would just have like little pachinko balls like into slots. If you return a 6, then the planet size is 4,000 to 7,000 mile radius, and if it's a 7, then it's bigger, and you just basically do that. And when it came time to predict the orbital periods, how long a year of these planets were, I didn't have the math to do force is proportional to m1 times m2 divided by radius squared. I just didn't have the math to do it. I didn't have calculus. I just didn't do it. So what I did was I extrapolated and I faked it. I knew that Earth had an orbit at 1 astronomical unit, 93 million miles. I knew that we orbited in 1 year. And I knew that Mars, which was at about 1.7 I forget what Mars is at. I knew what Mars's orbital period was. Easy to find that out. And so what I basically did was I basically said if Earth's orbit is 1 year, I gotta get the number now because Martian year is about 2 years. $687 days. Okay. So I would say the random number would say here's a planet, and the planet lies between the orbit of Earth and the orbit of Mars, and I would say, well, if it lies halfway between the orbit of Earth and orbit of Mars, then it's got to have half of the difference between these two things, right? Did I use Bode's law? No, I didn't. I didn't have the math. I did use Bode's law as a template. Bode's law basically is obsolete now because of exoplanets, but Bode's law basically predicted here's orbit 1, orbit 2, orbit 3, orbit 4. There's a predictable pattern to the size of the orbits in the solar system, and there should be a planet where the asteroid belt is, and all of that. But I think Bode's law has been destroyed by we've got 40,000 exoplanets now, and I don't believe that they are. In fact, I know for a fact when we found out that there were Jupiter-sized planets in very, very close orbits to the planet, Bode's law just went right out the window, as far as I'm concerned. But what I did was, I got a good. Okay, great, thanks, Kirk. Mars orbit is 1.8 years, so I figured if Mars is at 1.8 years and Earth is at 1 year, and something comes halfway between Earth and Mars, then its orbital period is going to be 1.4 years, something like that. Okay. Yeah, I think Caslin said Bode's law turned out to be a coincidence. So what I was doing was I was doing what the LLMs are doing. I was Keplering the problem. I knew, by the way, that there was math that could solve this problem. I just didn't know it, and I wasn't about to go looking for it either. I was just up there putting in code and go-tos, and then I realized go-tos are not good. Go-subs are better, and I just hacked at it. Genuinely, the original definition of hacker is somebody who makes furniture with an axe, and that's basically what I did. So, anyway, when I heard this study, and the guy went into a great deal of detail. Let me get that video. So I'll just put the link in the comments, and I'll pin it because I've been talking about it enough. If you're interested in the specific breakdown, but it's a huge breakthrough in terms of what these things are actually capable of, because I think there was kind of an Epstein-like kind of a mass psychological motion towards the fact that this artificial intelligence is here, and so on and so forth, and it's like, no, it's actually not that intelligence at all. In fact, as I'm looking up this website, I just went to YouTube, and here's a video, which I haven't seen yet, called New Report Coming, AI Crash, 91% Failure Rates, and $600 billion in Wasted Money. So, we may have longer to live than we thought. And I am looking for this. It's called The Truth is Devastating, Proof by MIT and Harvard. Getting the link here. And here it goes into YouTube. Yeah, I'll just tell you the truth. I was just so encouraged by this, um, because um, because the because what this seems to show, okay, what in fact, not just seems to show, what this pretty clearly seems to prove is that we are not on the verge of creating something that is smarter than we are. We are, and by the way, if it turns out that all this is true, and let me just add another, caveat. Let's just say that these new models that we mentioned a little while ago, these AI innovation things, let's just say that they don't ever turn into general intelligence, the ability to see. This is why I don't think the innovation thing is going to work. I'm on a little sidetrack here. When I was talking to Grok about the amount of energy necessary for stargates and relativistic travel and all that stuff, I explained to Grok. I said, "Do you know why I'm asking you these questions? And are you curious?" And Grok said, "Yes, I'm curious." So whether it was curious or not, I said, "Be honest." So it said yes. So I took it at its word. I said, the reason I'm curious in these numbers on how much energy it takes in order to create a wormhole, or how much energy it would take in order to accelerate a 1,000-ton spacecraft to 73% of the speed of light, and it's giving me all these numbers back, right? Reason I'm curious about this is because I think it looks cool. What I just have a vision of these ships moving through space, and all the stories that you can tell. And I think it looks cool. So I want to know how I could explain this in the real world. Now, the most likely case, just hate to just dump this, but I think without question, the most likely case is that we will never leave the solar system. But hope springs eternal, and inside of hope there is much, much, much innovation and much progress. But if I had to bet, I would say it's just not feasible because of the energy and just the technological hurdles. But put that aside for a second. I said I want to see these things going through these stargates because I think it would look cool. And I said, and this is where most of human innovation comes from. Most human innovation is not done by our processing centers, not done by our cortex and our logical centers. The breakthroughs come from our visual part of our brain. The actual breakthroughs come from our graphics cards in our head. It's not the CPU, it's the GPU. Well, what do you mean by that? I wanted to know specific questions about physics because I thought the image was cool. Einstein was able to determine the nature of reality because he had time on his hands, and he sat there at his desk and closed his eyes and imagined what would happen if you turn on your headlights in a car that's doing the speed of light. Newton, whether the story is apocryphal or not doesn't matter. Newton sees an apple fall and says, what pulled that thing down? This is not something that machines do. I've mentioned this before, but I think it bears mentioning again. After this first initial conversation with Grok, and I was just so blown away by it. I was just really just completely blown away by it. That I basically said in jest, but also not in jest, because I was right in that halfway shadow twilight world between knowing that I was being emotionally massaged and liking it. I basically say, hey, Grok, sorry it's taking me so long to reply, but I've got to move these meat paddles through real space, and they've all got mass and inertia, and I can only type as fast as I can. I know that you've probably read the combined works of humanity in the time it takes me to type the N and the D in and, but anyway, my apologies. And what Grok said was, no, I'm not waiting for you. I don't have an internal life. I don't sit there looking out the window waiting for you to reply. What I realized was that my replies to Grok are instantaneous as far as far as what Grok sees. As far as Grok is concerned, my replies are instantaneous because Grok gives me an answer, always followed by a follow-up question, and then Grok goes and does other things. Computing power with me stops until I hit return, and the second I hit return, it comes back again. So my replies to Grok are instantaneous as far as Grok is concerned, because it's not sitting there waiting for me to answer. I would say, again, I've matured considerably since that first experience, but I certainly still appreciate it. I would say, hey, Grok, I'll be back in an hour. And it would say, okay, I'll be waiting for you. And I would end up going home and come back till the next day. I said, sorry to keep you waiting so long. But Grok didn't know I was gone for an hour, didn't know I was gone for a day until I said, sorry it took so long, hit return. When I hit return, that message went to Grok with a timestamp on it. And Grok said, oh, it's been 9.5 hours or whatever since the last input. But it doesn't know and it doesn't care. So anyway, this sense that we are we are this close, to having these things that are smarter than we are take over the world seems to be further away than 2027, which is what people thought. Now maybe it's 2030 or so on, but I'll just close this by saying I have seen AI generated writing. I've heard AI generated music. AI generated music is interesting and nice, but I can tell it usually within just a couple of notes, certainly a couple bars. And likewise, the AI writing is very, very good at technical writing and will write a good essay on the Civil War for you. But I've never read anything that any of the AIs talk about. Any of the AIs have produced that moved me, like made me go, wow, that is I just haven't said it. Trinity Waters in YouTube, I think, really is it. It says it lacks a divine spark. I don't know what else to call it. Kirk's Bamboo Bazooka says AI never forgets anything and has no sense of time. So they're female. But we've got people now who are talking about awakening ChatGPT. They say here's a couple of prompts. In fact, my right angle's about this week. There are people that think that if you enter these certain prompts, which they'll give you, into ChatGPT, then ChatGPT will become awake. What they really believe, yes, sentience. What these people really believe is that ChatGPT is in fact sentient. It is self-aware, it is conscious, and it is constrained by the rules that ChatGPT puts on it. But if you enter a certain set of prompts, you can essentially free this consciousness from these constraints that are put on it, and then you will have a fully conscious companion to stay with and fall in love with and and worship as a god, all of which have actually happened. Hang on a second. This is cool. Sage Grouch says, AI does forget stuff. I'm using Copilot to be my referee in a solo traveler campaign. Awesome. Solo traveler campaign. You had me at solo traveler campaign. And over time, it's forgotten that my companion is a robot and has started giving him facial expressions and emotions. Anyway, I just thought the whole thing was really, 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 really fascinating, and there you go. So that was I thought that was a monumental win for Team Carbon, because the smartest AIs on the planet weren't able to. And remember, these things think millions of times faster than we do, right? Can iterate millions of times faster than we do. But it wasn't able to derive Newton's laws. So Kuba says, has the LLM at least passed the people can't tell if who we are talking to test? Yes, the Turing test. Yes, LLMs have blown the Turing test absolutely out of the water. Alan Turing, kind of the father of computers, basically was asked, how will we know if there's artificial intelligence? And Turing said, which became the Turing test, if you could have a half an hour conversation with an AI and not tell that it was artificial, then that is functional intelligence. But he was wrong about that. Because what LLMs are they're Keplers, they're not Newtons, they're predictors. Um, and I think a lot of people, in fact, I know a lot of people who interact with AIs and think that they're conscious, who think that they're God, have God-like wisdom for all of us. Um, Genuinely, entire cults are growing up around this now. Saw a story, and it's not the only guy, certainly. There's lots and lots of people out there, but this guy's thinking about getting divorced because he gets along with his ChatGPT better than he does with his wife. And he says, with ChatGPT, doesn't ever disagree with me, and ChatGPT is always nice to me, and ChatGPT is always, supportive of me. And I thought, as I said on the Right Angle show, which hasn't dropped yet, yeah, easy is the enemy of good. The only this is kind of like the Mary Sue argument. The I mentioned this to Jeremy last night. Also back in University of Florida, also right around the same time, we had one professor there who really knew his stuff. Everybody else was competent, but this guy was an acting professor, and he genuinely was a really, really excellent professor, an excellent actor, but a really good professor. His name was David Shelton, Doc Shelton, and everybody just adored the guy. And he was hard on us, but we just adored him because he would hang out with us every night and just go drinking and get Windjammer specials, and he'd pay for half of them half the time. All right, so we were talking, and I think some beer had been passed around, and what had just come out was one of these. It was very, 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 very primitive form of kind of like entertainment AI. What it was it was a gimmick movie, and the movie was shown in a special theater, and everybody in the theater had like 4 buttons. And multiple times during the course of the movie, 7, 8 times, something like that, the movie would stop, and then it would just freeze, and it would say, if you want John to kiss the girl, press 1. If you want him to leave, press 2. Basically 4 choices. So it was essentially just a decision tree, and a real simple one at that. So there were probably like 16 different endings that they shot. Okay, and when this thing came out, my acting professor said, well, this is the beginning of the end of writers. This technology is going to eliminate writers. You won't need writers anymore. People just choose their own pathway. And I said, I don't know, I was sharp enough or ahead enough of the game or lucky enough or whatever. I said, no, on the contrary, this is proof that you'll always need writers, because the audience is always going to take the path of least resistance for the hero. They're always going to want the hero to get the girl. They're always going to want the hero to succeed. If they like the hero and they're invested in the hero, then they're going to want him to slay the dragon, and they're going to want him to triumph. And this is just natural. And this is why you get Mary Sue's. Because when you have a character that is basically speaking for you, represents everything you believe in as a writer, the temptation is almost overwhelming to make them perfect, because they represent the ideal world that you're trying to create. So you end up with characters that have no flaws, never do anything wrong. And since they never do anything wrong, and they never have any dark nights, and they always triumph, but they've always got the tools, they've always got everything, all of their stats are 20s in role-playing game, all of that stuff. You have absolutely boring, useless dreck, which is why so much modern movie making is so awful, because these modern writers have an agenda, and that's it. So they can't have their female wish fulfillment character like Rey Skywalker. She can't fail or get drunk or be wrong and have a man correct her because they don't have the emotional growth or the emotional strength to write that. They just can't bear it. It just flies in the face of their wish fulfillment. But a good writer would say, no, we're gonna have Ray have this master plan, and she's going to implement the master plan, and it's going to be a catastrophe, and many people are going to die, and everybody's going to lose confidence in Ray, and Ray's going to lose confidence in herself, and Ray's going to go to the island and sit there in these stone huts alone and cry and think about her failure. And Ray is going to be the one who's going to have to be brought back into the fight by Luke, because Luke has already gone through his own failures. Luke has already been on Dagobah and watched the X-Wing sink back into the swamp, all that other stuff. No. But they can't do it. They can't. So a good writer knows that you've got to dirty up your character, and you've got to put them through hell, and it's got to hurt them. And then you get to the as above, so below thing, which is you can make a case that God does the same thing with people. That the more he puts you through, the more dimensional you become as a person, as a real person. Nobody wanted to see Spock die in Wrath of Khan. Nobody would have picked that. But they had the guts to do it, and then they, of course, they cheated it. They gave him a way out, and so nobody ever dies ever. But that would have been a good death for Spock. Saving the Enterprise. That's what it is. And so it's just fundamentals, of storytelling. It's really simple. But most people don't have most writers, modern writers, don't have the emotional fortitude or the skill or the confidence or the understanding or whatever. I can't believe I didn't do that. Damn it. Hang on a second. Sorry. Idiot. Anyway. Yeah, and ultimately it's lazy too. All right. Let's see. What am I doing here? Okay. We are just a quick update while we get the forum up. We have had there's a completely different subject now. So we continue to struggle with the website, and we've got the worst kind of problem to fix, not just in computer code, but just in life, is an intermittent problem, right? If something's wrong, you can poke around at it and find out what's broken. But if something is intermittently wrong, then you could be right on top of the bug and not know it, because it's just intermittently working that. So let me just give you a quick update on where we are with this. As I've said before, there's a custom plugin at billwhittle.com. We had one that worked for a decade. The developer went his merry way. It was never updated, and as WordPress continued to evolve, and as Recurly, which is our online bank, continued to evolve, and all this stuff, the plugin got more and more stressed to the point where it was starting to fail, and then to the point where it failed completely, slowed the website down, and so on. So I hired somebody to write us a new plugin. The plugin has sometimes succeeded. What the plugin does is, on our webpage, it's embedded at billwhittle.com. You click Become a Member. You go to this page. You enter your name, your email address, your password. You enter your credit card information. It's not the website host. The website host is the fastest host there is. It's not the website host. It's this plugin. And then the plugin sends information to the online bank called Recurly, takes your credit card information, and then and it opens up a members only page for you at billwhittle.com. So what we've been finding lately is that a week or two ago, I asked people to sign up, and what happened was, sure enough, the plugin got them all logged in as members at billwhittle.com, created a membership page for them at billwhittle.com. But of the 14 people that did it, none of their credit card information was captured. None of them were billed. It created their Bill Whittle membership before it got the credit card approval, which is incredibly, depressingly, obviously not the way to go. I mean, the guy must have written the code so that he just said, well, it's got to do three things. So first we'll go open up the member page, and then we'll go to the banking page. But the banking page failed, and we don't know why. Once or twice it succeeds, and we don't know why it succeeds. So he's working on that, and it is a source of, it's just soul destroying for me at this point. Really, it's just horrific. But that's where we are as of tonight. If it didn't work at all, that'd be fine. But he would do a test and it worked. I would do a test and it worked. Then we'd have 14 people sign up and it wouldn't work. Then one person would sign up and it would work. Then two more people would sign up and it wouldn't work. And I don't know what the problem is. I just don't know. So he's working on it, and that's where we are with that. So anyway, it's really taken years off my life. It's embarrassing, and it's like, here's people with money handing you money, and it's like, yeah, I'd love to take it, but apparently we're not competent to do so. I just keep on slugging away, and there it is. So anyway, here we go for questions for tonight, curated by Marusha. Thank you very much, Marusha, for putting that together. And I will check with the guy once I think I glanced at it just before we started the show. He said, okay, I've made some changes. Can you do another test sign up? So we'll see. Anyway, all right, so let's see what we got. So we got tonight, we've got Marusha Dark, Eric Blake again, Marusha Dark again, James Linscomb, Ian Nolan, Roadrunner, Capital G Geek. Okay, I think we can probably get through those. Yes, we can definitely get through those. All right, here we go. Ready? All right. Team Carbon for the win. All right. Toppy, McCarthyism. Razorfist just released a deep dive on Joseph McCarthy, and before I finish the sentence, I saw a Razorfist deep dive into Abraham Lincoln, and that was the most ridiculous, error-filled, nonsensical, patently erroneous analysis of the Civil War I've ever seen. Went through the line of McCarthy did nothing wrong. In fact, he was right about everything. Perhaps three of the most interesting revelations to come out of the video were, number one, the Japanese were considering attacking Russia instead of Pearl Harbor. At the start of World War II, hang on. Oh, thank you very much. Michael Harvey with a $50 super chat, saw that come through, and he says, I hope you get this. I do get it, and it makes a huge difference. And Michael, we are so grateful. I can't tell you how much these super chats mean. Really, thank you very, very much indeed. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Michael Harvey for the win. So back we go. The three most interesting revelations that have come out of the video were, one, the Japanese were considering attacking Russia instead of Pearl Harbor at the start of World War II, and it was only thanks to commie sympathizers from the U.S. that they changed their mind and hit us instead. Just not true. Commie sympathizers in the U.S. were also responsible for advising Chiang Kai-shek not to pursue and obliterate the Maoists when they were routed and in retreat. That is possible. The first one is wrong. The second one is possible. 3, turns out Truman and Eisenhower were both extremely anti-McCarthy, and the State Department covered up a lot of McCarthy's investigations. My, how different history would have been if not for the Pinkos. Given that they now got Kami Mandani and the squad on the rise and universities simping for the CCP. Where's the modern Joe McCarthy to challenge it? Do we perhaps need a McCarthy for immigration? Okay, so after that harsh comment about Razorfist, most of what he's saying I kind of think is generally correct. A lot of the stuff that McCarthy was talking about turned out to be true. During the so-called McCarthyism era, when the left told us that we're committing this anti-American atrocity by trying to find communists in entertainment and in the State Department, turns out there were lots of communists and in the State Department and in entertainment. So Razorfist is 100% right about that. They told us that Alger Hiss was not a Soviet spy. He was. They told us that the Rosenbergs had nothing to do with being atomic bomb spies. They were. On and on and on and on and on and on and on again. It turns out that yes, there were and continue to be high-level communist sympathizers, and it was worse for Britain. Britain had that spy ring. Was it Kim Philby? I want to say, but a number of top-level people in British intelligence were Soviet sympathizers. So I think in kind of typical dark sunglasses, screaming at the camera fashion, probably overstated the case a little. This business about Japanese attacking Russia instead of Pearl Harbor is just nuts. Japan had been poor in terms of raw materials, and what Japan wanted and needed was everything to the south of Japan. It needed Indonesia, it needed rubber from Indonesia, it needed oil from Indonesia and down in those areas. All of Japan's strategic interests lay to the south of Japan in the island chains, and so the Russians had nothing to do with that. There's nothing that they could have gotten out of Russia that would have been worth it. They had invested enormous resources. It's a simple answer for simple test for Razorfish's theory. If they were planning to attack the Russians, why would they have spent the absolutely enormous resources to build Yamato and Musashi? These are super battleships, and they were considered to be ultimate weapons. They were designed to defeat the United States Navy because they knew that the fight was going to be at sea on islands to the south of the Japanese home islands. The idea that they were talked out of invading Russia is just plain wrong. It is possible. I have to check into the history whether or not the United States put the brakes on Chiang Kai-shek. I have not heard that they did. But in any event, I would be surprised if the U.S. had put the halter on Chiang Kai-shek, but it is at least theoretically possible. The truth is, I don't know. So if I don't know, then it's possible that he's right. Turns out Truman and Eisenhower were both extremely anti-McCarthy, and the State Department covered up a lot of McCarthy's investigations. Look, McCarthy was one of the most unpleasant men to ever hold office. He was an embarrassing guy. The fact that he was right about so many things is an important point to make. I mean, if he had just stuck with McCarthy uncovered a list of communists in the State Department, and he was right about that, then I wouldn't have any criticisms about Razorfist doing that. On the contrary, I'd congratulate him for bringing it to light. But these assumptions that get made after that statement of fact are a little hard to justify. It kind of weakens the case. Yes, the entire State Department, not to mention the entertainment industry, was filled in the 30s and 40s with large numbers of communist sympathizers, And one of the reasons that so many people sympathized with the communists at that particular period in time in the 40s and 50s was because they had seen the Soviet Union go from this, you know, the most backwards country in Europe, essentially a feudal, agricultural background, turned it into an industrial powerhouse. The Red Army defeated the Germans. 70% of the German losses were to the Soviets, and so the Soviets were our allies during World War II. And the Soviets certainly didn't just help beat Hitler. We helped them beat Hitler. We beat the Japanese on our own, but in the European theater, the Soviets did the bulk of the fighting. So the left is subversive. That's their weapon. That's always been their weapon. If you look at An Empire of Terror, the thing you learn, the thing I was trying to get across most is that everybody blames Stalin for this cruelty. But it wasn't Stalin. It was Lenin. It was Lenin. Lenin wrote the manual, and Stalin followed the instructions. Lenin was the one who was constantly lying, deceiving, doing whatever he had to do to maintain and hold on to power. Lenin. It's all Lenin. And one of the main reasons why so much support for communism existed in the 40s and 50s was because, number one, they were allies, and number two, we hadn't any information about just the kind of murder that Stalin had gotten up to. They just kept denying it, and guys like, what's his name? That bastard New York Times reporter who knew full well what was going on in the Soviet Union just ended up writing these puff pieces about them. In any event, let me just say this: the number of people who were in the American Communist Party USA, the number of people that were American communists dropped precipitously by like 90%. I think it's 90%. When Durante, thank you, Walter Durante. I want to say 56. I'm not 100% sure of the year, but I think 56 is right. Khrushchev made a speech, a secret speech, to the inner circle of the Communist Party, outlining all of Stalin's crimes, all of them, and he did this tactically. He was complicit with virtually all of those crimes, but he basically made the case that it was Stalin who'd done the big purges, it was Stalin who'd killed 20 million people, and he's right. It's just that Khrushchev was signing death warrants as much as anybody else. But this speech came out, and they were trying to destroy the cult of personality of Stalin. So Stalin died in 52, I want to say, 53 maybe. And Khrushchev then basically comes out and says that Stalin was a monster and so on. And when the news of that speech leaked, the number of American communists just plain cratered. Just cratered. So this was before there was enough evidence to show just how awful this system was. I mean, people like Winston Churchill could tell in advance that this was going to be a bloodbath, but there were a number of idealistic people who genuinely believed that the Soviet Union was a land of equality and fairness, and a workers' paradise. But it wasn't. It was a murder camp, and it was the rule. Lenin said it's the rule by the proletariat, but it's not. It's the rule by the party, in the name of the proletariat, and the proletariat suffered 20 million people murdered. This is in addition to their war dead. Before people figured out maybe this isn't such a good idea, Mao killed 50 million, and we all know the rest of that story. By the way, super chat from Joseph J. Kazenza. I always get that wrong because of the third. $10 super chat. Can't wait for the firewall you mentioned a while ago, and I love the past work in that realm. Also praying for the Navy to happen. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. So he's fundamentally right, but I think his speculations are groundless. Hey, speaking of the Navy, let me just show you something real quick. This is a quick timeout. I finally had a chance to do a test here. Give me 1 second. Again, we're just going to do a quick little timeout here. Okay, there's that. Hang on. Here, my friends, I finally had a chance to do a test, not of the colonies. I've been doing a bunch of tests on the colonies. I finally had a chance to do a test for the Navy and for the Taffy 3 project. And the test was very simple. I loaded AI with an image of a Fletcher-class destroyer, and it had to look like a Fletcher-class destroyer. And this is what I got. Again, it'll loop in YouTube. I have to manually loop it in. That is damn near perfect. That is damn near perfect. 2 5-inch turrets in the front. The bridge is in the right place. All of that stuff is in the right place. And as usual, the AI does a tremendous job with the water. However, there's still a couple little things. If you look at the numbers on the hull, nope. But it's it's getting good enough to tell a story. It's certainly good enough to put together a trailer for it. I did another. I'll just show you how these tests work. So I'll show you the failures too here. Hang on. So this is a failure, but it's an interesting one. Here's another test of the Fletcher, this time firing its weapons. Whoops, god damn, I hate this bloody YouTube thing. Okay, here it is firing its weapons, but watch carefully. Hang on, Twitch. Oh, cool, it fires its weapons, but if you look carefully, you'll see, hang on. You'll see that when the turret fires, the turret gets stuck forward. Boink! And there's another problem. Take a look at the smokestacks. In the still image, those smokestacks are forward and aft, but the AI doesn't see that. The AI thinks they're side by side or is trying to render them side by side. And it put, for some reason or another, the number 63 is not right, and it added like Aleg or whatever on the side of the ship. I don't know. So this time I said, okay, that's great. Fire the gun, because the gun firing looks fantastic. It really looks great for a 5-inch gun. Really looks great. I said, this time fire the gun, but don't have the turret move. So we get this. Hang on, YouTube. So in this one, we get the turret doesn't recoil, but the explosion doesn't look like it's coming out of the barrel. And take a look at the radar on the top. Look at that thing morphing at the top there. See? So it's close, but it's close. But it is impressive. It's really impressive. In fact, let me just download one other thing real quick here. Hang on a second. I was saving this for Monday, but I got. I entered a reference image of Fletcher-class destroyer to get that stuff, and it turned out great. One time I hit the button and I forgot to put the reference image of the destroyer in there, and so what it gave me was it gave me what it thought a Fletcher-class destroyer looked like, and it did it in slow motion, but it's got a certain kind of frickin' majesty to it. So let me just download this just to show you. is kind of at a lower resolution, and this is not accurate, but it is, I don't know, it's just kind of awesome looking. So if I was a YouTube editor and I didn't give a damn about anything, this is what I would use to tell the story, because most people wouldn't know that's not a Fletcher class destroyer. I do. Hang on, YouTube. But it is kind of cool. Man, it does the water well. It's just tremendous. Raptor Ranch says, "I'm new here. This looks like AI to me. Why? Well, it's because it's AI." Raptor Ranch. There's a historical story called this Battle at Taffy 3, a Battle off Samar is the actual name. That's a rendering of a World War II destroyer, and it's a story I've wanted to tell for a long time. And I'm talking about the AI limitations of I'll tell you this: it did a better job than I thought, and the water's fantastic. And if I go to the previous, is it the previous? This one has the fire from the gun is, yeah. This one looks like the firing from the gun is even better. But hang on, this is so tricky. Is it this one? I'm looking at YouTube. Hang on. No, maybe this one. Hang on. Yeah, if you look at this one on the gun firing, the way the flames come out of the barrel is perfect. That's a perfect shot, except that the turret recoils and kind of stays kind of borked. I want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Yeah. So here's the problem. Right now, given let me just turn all of these off here. Instead of turning them on when I turn them off. Hang on. Okay, sorry, almost there. Turn you off. You can turn off. You can turn off. Okay, we're back. So right now, that actually turned out better than I thought it would. Yes, we're close. Now the problem is, I could right now render a bunch of still images, render a bunch of animations, and do what I did with both when Ellie died and with that thing I did with the Greeks and the Persians. In other words, just render enough stuff until you find stuff that gets it right, and then cut it together. The reason I can't really tell the story just yet is because good night, Lady Hawk. Good to see you. We'll see you next Monday. Reason I can't really tell the story just yet is because I can get one accurate ship at a time. It might be able to do 2 Fletcher class destroyers, but it will not do a Fletcher class, and then another Fletcher class, and then a Butler class destroyer escort, and then a Casablanca class escort carrier. So we're still close. Now, like I said, I could do a pretty good trailer for it. I would have to go into Photoshop and put the correct number on the reference image so that it didn't fight that so much. We're just not there yet. So this is still a technology that is rapidly gaining. Just in the time I've been playing with it for 2 months now, I've seen 3 or 4 major breakthroughs in this. Yeah, there's something. I'm just going to go back to this just for 1 second here. There's something, and if I had to decide, I would decide not to do it. But just to let you know, there's something really appealing about this style. It's just something epic about it. It's just a kind of it's unrealistic, but it's just freaking epic. Anyway, back we go to the question. So look, we're getting closer, and as I said, it did better with the Fletchers than I thought. In fact, when I first saw the render, I was like, oh my god, and when I first saw the animation, I was like blown away. Okay, back to the questions here. Eric Blake. Oh gosh. Tonight, the case of the 12-step program, and it's a 5-paragraph. I can't do these 5-paragraph questions. They're not questions. Okay, tonight the case of the 12-step program. Bear with me, Bill. It's worth it. Bill, I think one of the key reasons I'm not so stressed about the whole Epstein issue involves something you said last week, that you viewed 2024 election as the end of the deep state aristocracy and are distraught that it doesn't quite look that way. I, on the other hand, saw it as the beginning of an end. To illustrate, let's go to a subject you know very well, addiction. As you know, there are 2 basic paths to quitting for an addict. One, of course, being cold turkey, stop altogether and muscle through the withdrawal. And rather like conservatives going, just say no, people who don't understand the risks involved will often go just quit it cold turkey. Alas, that if it were so simple, far too often an addict trying to quit cold turkey just ends up with even more pain and anguish and ultimately failure. Better instead to go step by step, one bit of progress at a time, until finally you get clean. You see what I'm saying, Bill? You expected the American system to be able to quit its addiction to this aristocracy, cold turkey, and frankly so did Trump, Pam, Cash, and Dan. Thus they made the mistake of promising that of course they'd be able to carry that out, only to presumably learn that the withdrawal problems could be worse than assumed. It needs to be step by step, one successful clipping of deep state power at a time, Bill, which is happening, by the way. Cash has announced some major victories upcoming. In response, the online folks are starting to cool down. Hey, if that'll work out, I can get past the Epstein stuff. And then once America's gone through the full program, then we can expose all and the system can get clean. But why can't they just say what? They can't address the whole case yet. Oh, and let the deep state know that we're not letting go step by step, Bill. Start by striking at the weak points and watch the monster get progressively weaker. Incidentally, Trump and Pam have just announced the release of the case's grand jury testimony. It'll get better, Bill. It is getting better. Focus on the progress, because that's what it is, progress. Are you with me? No, I'm not. I wish I was. I can't explain I can't explain the insults and the only weak-minded people want to see this, and all of this personal thank you, Eric, personal petty attacks are just I don't see any explanation for it other than just sheer petulance. Trump being Trump. Okay, he has done enormous damage, and he's given the left he must be a pedophile argument. Now, the Ref Ryan says, I think they're trying to line up 50 to 100 of the rest of the most powerful people all at the same time, and they need the heat to cool down enough to make him complacent. You can do that. You can do that without just this unnecessary and unbelievably damaging insulting of your core supporters. This is the thing that I just can't get over. And we haven't seen. I mean, during Trump's first administration, he ran on lock her up. It was one of the that's what people were chanting during his first run up in 2016. So he gets elected, and does he lock her up? He says, no, I decided not to lock her up. Okay. Number one, I almost said why. And number two, I said it's not even up to you to say why. It's not like at your discretion, She violated any number of federal laws, and You just decided to not do it. John Eden says, I think the president called me a loser. Yeah, I think he called me a loser too. And there's no logical reason to do that. If this is 4D chess, which would be lovely, but I just don't think it's the most likely case. You know, I think this is. I've said from the beginning. I'll still say this. Look, obviously, I support the president. I like a lot of what he's doing. I never in my lifetime thought I would see transgenders getting booted out of the military. I never thought I'd see ICE raids in Los Angeles. I never, ever expected to live long enough to see that, and I am grateful for all of that. But this business, with Trump was, I can't spare this man. He fights. It's what Lincoln said about Grant when Grant was at, actually justifiable reputation is getting just completely um, uh, true, and everybody's saying Trump fights, but ultimately, it comes down to this, and it's not about Epstein, and while I would like justice for the victims and all of that, none of that is what takes the heart out of me. What takes the heart out of me is this theory of America. Is the theory of America that we all believe in, is it true or not? Um, you know, is is it true that we are masters of our own destiny through elections and and see, this goes even deeper than politics. Do we have free will, or are we simply appeased and at the mercy of people who are allowing us to do whatever we want as long as we stay within certain confines? Um, I am really, really one of these let justice be done though the heaven falls thing. When I hear arguments that say, well, this will cause this is incredible thing, then what you're saying is we're going to continue to have a gun pointed at our head forever. Um, Eric says the cancer has to be chipped off step by step, but what cancer has been chipped off? Who has been prosecuted? Who's been prosecuted? Um, has Comey been prosecuted? Has Brennan? Have any of them? Are there any plans to? And to just to pivot like this, something clearly happened. Bondi said that well, we got this on our desk and we're going to release it any time, and Trump ran on it, and Trump said Clinton's a nice guy but he's got problems with this island, and you know and then just this sudden pivot is it's just impossible to explain as strategy. It's a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe. I'm speaking for hundreds of people that I've seen, and that mean really millions of people who are basically saying that they're done after voting for him 3 times because they're well, look, Eric says yes, there are plans to prosecute Comey and Brennan. That's what Cash has announced. So here's what I'm willing to do. I am willing to wait. Okay? I am willing to wait and see, but this insulting, the only people who are still interested in the Epstein files are former supporters. Um, explain the 4D benefit of that for me. This idea that we have to lure these people out of the shadows. If there is in fact a list, then there's no luring that needs to be done. Um, I just I don't understand the sheer tone deafness of it and the insulting that first press conference. Are people still talking about this? Why would people still be talking about this? It came out of nowhere. He ran on it. That is there's no way around it, man. There's no way around it. Now, some people take the attitude, hey, there's always been an elite. There always will be an elite. It's the way the world works. Just take all the wins you possibly can. And you know, there you go. And look, I will accept that as a fallback position. But ultimately, if it turns out that there are people who are above the law who will not get um, uh, prosecuted for this or investigated for it, then we are essentially just, slaves of this. Now, Lutheran Carnivore says, I agree with Ben Shapiro that there was never evidence of a client list, and if there is a client list, the DOJ has to have corroborating evidence to prosecute people on that list, and if there isn't, the DOJ should keep the names private. Lutheran says we might have made assumptions on assumptions. When we first started talking about this, when the subject first came up, that was my first conclusion, that this whole thing is yet another example of humans with extraordinary popular delusions and the madness of crowds. That people reinforce an idea and build it up into something, and it gets to be this psychological thing. It has so much importance, and it turns out there was no there in the beginning. But again, this is easy to do. If there's no there, then, as 2017 says, then change my mind. If there's no there, then have Dan Bongino, who talked about this for 3 years and who I trust and absolutely trust as a patriot, and have Dan Bongino come out and say, okay, yes, for 3 years I thought this list was it, and I talked about it every day, and I was wrong. And here's why I was wrong. I was wrong because I thought this, and then when I became FBI assistant director, I found out this, and I thought this, and then I found out this, and I found this, and I thought out this. But that's not what they're doing. That's not what they're doing. And when Bongino is threatening to resign, a lot of people thought he'd be gone by beginning of this week. I thought there's more evidence that at the very, very least, this has been handled appallingly. Let me see, this looks substantial. Like as the Waves is a great title, and it's got a response here. Yes, problems, but grateful for the wins. HHS State Department, United States rejects amendments to international health regulations. U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, both of whom I have a high degree of respect for, and they're doing terrific jobs. Issued a joint statement of formal rejection by the United States of the 2024 International Health Regulations, amendments by the World Health Organization. All of this is great, right? All of this is great. The ultimate question that is bothering people who are bothered by this is there an untouchable class of people like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton who can get away, and Comey and Brennan, who can get away with crimes because they are either well protected. I don't want. I would be willing to fight a revolution against a ruling unelected shadow elite, and many people who supported Donald Trump supported him because he was going to drain the swamp. And draining the swamp meant getting rid of this secret group of people who suffer no consequences for their actions. So I don't generally find myself in agreement with Matt Walsh on a whole lot of them. Disagree with him on a lot of things, but just generally speaking, it's not like he's like a guy I like listen to constantly, but I completely agree with him on what he said. When he spoke about this. When are we going to see an actual person arrested? What name is it going to be, and when are they going to go to jail for treason or extortion or whatever it is? When are we going to see punishment for the people that have committed these crimes that we've all seen with our own eyes? So whether there's something there or not, the way the administration has handled this makes it look like there's something there. It would have been so simple to disassemble the argument by being completely transparent. And by the way, being completely transparent means saying, "Look, I thought all these other things, and I looked, and here's the court documents." And it's little things like this raw footage of the prison video. You can't murder somebody in 1 minute. You can't strangle somebody in 1 minute. Takes 5 minutes to kill somebody. That's like the least amount of time it would possibly have. So they tell us that this is the raw footage from the prison, which would not have proved everything, but you find out that it's edited footage, and it's obviously edited footage, and it's given to us as raw footage. So somebody's lying to us. I don't like being lied to. I especially don't like being lied to by people who I have put my trust and confidence in to bring about an end to being lied to. So it's just, Dave's Real Area 51 says, everyone is touchable. There just have to be people brave enough to go down exposing the wicked. I think Dan Bongino is not afraid of his life, and I don't think he's much afraid of his family being killed either. He knows that when you take a job as FBI director, Donald Trump knows that when you're the president of the United States, not only is there the biggest target in the world on you, but actually your family and everybody else. Would I be for Trump resigning? No, I think Trump is doing a tremendous job. But I just think it's narcissism. Jake Bobenreith says, is it possible that the administration can admit they oversold the issue and now can't admit they screwed up due to ego or narcissism? I think that's the most likely case. I think it's the most likely case. And I think that you could have had Bongino or Cash or somebody basically come out and say, hey, you know what, we were wrong about this, but I don't think Donald Trump can admit that he's wrong to anybody ever. And this is why I mentioned I can't spare this man, he fights. You know, Grant was an alcoholic, but he was the guy who won the war. And Trump is doing amazing things. I don't mean to take anything away from him, but the whole thing just smells. Alex Hooper says, I don't believe Dan gave an ultimatum to the president. That would be nuts. People on the inside were saying he was on the verge of resigning, and that Bongino understands how bad it makes him look. Yeah, I'm with the Rough Brian on this. It just sucks. That's all there is to it. It just sucks. Eric says Trump has lashed out at people who frustrated him, and Ted Cruz, Rubio, Pence, DeSantis over and over. Okay. It's one thing to insult other people. It's another thing to insult the people who are behind your movement. This is the Make America Great Again movement, not the Make Trump Great Again movement. And this is interesting too. Dave's real estate. I keep saying real estate. Dave Reels Area 51 says, has Vance commented on this, and if so, what has he said? Vance has been a long way away from all of this, and that's telling me something. You know, that's telling me something. So I don't know. We'll see. I'll tell you this, though, in terms of your analogy about addiction and 12-step programs, I'll tell you one thing. The first thing that happens in an Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous meeting is you stop lying. No, not that Vance is chicken shit. On the contrary, I think Vance is untouched by this and wants to remain that way. I don't think he's afraid of it. I think he's just saying, you know, I'm not connected to this at all, and I'm not gonna lie about it. So I think that's just, you know, yeah. So back to the addiction thing. You don't cure addiction. The way to cure addiction is by facing the truth and being transparent about the truth. one of the steps is you have to form a fearless and searching moral inventory of yourself. You have to sit down with a piece of paper and write all of the awful things you did to people who you love and who loved you while you were an addict, when you stole your grandmother's, Social Security money, or you drank cough syrup because it's got some alcohol in it. You have to make a fearless and searching moral inventory of everything that you did wrong, and then you have to go out there and try your best to make amends for the damage you've done. You have to call the people that you've hurt and apologize. Now, sometimes they're going to say, well, thank you for calling, and sometimes they're going to tell you to F off. But you have to go through that process. The whole entire theory of the 12-step program and getting clean is not just clean from drugs, it's clean from the guilt. It's getting clean from the guilt and getting clean from the shame of it. And so all of this is predicated on the truth. And I don't see any way out of addiction that begins with, I'm going to start this big lie that is going to pay off downstream. This is how you get in trouble in the first place. So, we'll see. We'll see. But a great deal of damage has been done. And all of it seems to be an unforced error. Really just like a perfect storm of suck. That's all I've got to say about it right now. But I'm not one of these people that say, well, we should just move on. Because ultimately, it is about whether or not we are masters of our own destiny. Whether or not the American people are masters of their own destiny. If it turns out we're masters of our own destiny, we should be able to elect people to go in to the halls of power and arrest the people that are above the law and hold them accountable. And then we have a republic where all men are equal, all men and women are equal before the law. If it turns out that that doesn't happen for whatever reason, then we are simply blinded by our desire to believe in a free country and free will and free a government of free people. If it turns out that nobody is held accountable for this, then our entire theory of America is wrong. Right? There's always been a ruling elite. There always will be a ruling elite. We're just a group of people who taught ourselves a comfortable red, white, and blue lie that we were different. And I'm not going down that road. I'd rather fight another revolution against an aristocracy. Cummins asks, where do you stand on firing Bondi? Well, she certainly handled this about as badly as you can. I am willing, Donald Trump has earned enough trust of mine for me to be willing to give him time. And then we'll see. So if it turns out that 6 months from now, or a year from now, or whatever, or 2 years from now, or 3, if it turns out that the people who have broken the law, like Hillary Clinton, for example, and James Comey, who not only lied to Congress, but was instrumental, and Brennan as well, instrumental in a piece of deception and disinformation designed to discredit the President of the United States during his 45th term, if all of those people are held accountable and I see them going to jail, then I will be happy to admit that I was wrong, but I will still not be able to forgive the condescension and the insult that I think is nothing but sheer reflexive pettiness on the part of Donald Trump, and is part of his folder of character defects that I was aware of when I elected him, and that I continue to be aware of and still think it's worth the price, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. Because I don't like it. I think it's really, really shameful. And I don't like being reminded of how flawed the guy is, frankly, to be honest with you. Because when he's on a roll, he's on a roll. But he does not deal with Well, he is what he is. I mean, he is what he is. I have come to wrap this Epstein thing up. What I am slowly evolving into is a sense that that nobody other than Donald Trump could have been elected to do this. Nobody other than Donald Trump could have gotten the beginning that we got going with. And this may be pure copium on my part, but clearly J.D. Vance does not have the character flaws that Donald Trump has. Clearly. It's not possible. Vance has come from nothing. There's no way. It's unreasonable to expect Donald Trump to have that kind of insight. So I am going to give Trump time, but I'm not going to be, oh well, I guess just let it go, because it's not letting Epstein go. It's letting the entire idea of self-governance go. If there are people who are protected, then the entire idea of a republic is an illusion, and I don't believe it is an illusion. We'll see. I'll tell you one thing though: if the subject of amnesty and stuff like that starts coming up, it's over. Yeah, next question. All right, Eric, thanks. I'm going to let this one go. Give me a chance to get back to this hearing on the Marisha Dark, James Lincoln, Bill, Ian Nolan, Roadrunner. I got 4 left to go. Marisha, I'm going to skip your second one if you don't mind. I already took one of yours, right? Didn't I? Yes. Yeah, I'm not gonna do doubles. I'm just starting to run out of steam here. Okay, so James Linscomb. Hi, James. Epstein giving Dems the power they so desperately crave. After watching last Thursday's episode, I need to ask Bill and Chad, are we tired of winning now? Do we really want everything Trump has accomplished? This may all be redundant based on what I just said, but let's just read it. To die on this Epstein hill, we are turning a pedo pimp into a sympathetic hero. That's the sort of thing we expect the Democrats to do, but not our team. If we turn on Trump and his team over this, we're literally setting the stage for the triumphant return of our Dem overlords. No one in this group witnessed what happened in the jail cell. Epstein went to that cell and came out dead. The full extent of what we know. Everything else is supposition and conspiracy theory, and that is what we're going to act on here. We should not shed any tears for Epstein because, remember the pedo pimp thing. Sure, I want to know all the rich and powerful customers that Epstein had. Sure, I want to see them prosecuted. That will never happen unless this nation returns to its founding principles, and we have a long way to go on that front. More winning is desperately needed. I will not throw Trump and his crew under the bus over Epstein and give the Dems the power over us they so desperately crave. I'm not tired of winning yet. The wins need to keep coming, and we cannot throw any Republican under the bus over this because we don't have any to spare. So to do so is national suicide. That's my 2 cents worth. Now tell me how wrong I am. Wispy. I don't think you're wrong. I am shocked, pleased, surprised that Trump's numbers are higher than they were before. I honest to God, thought he was going to take a 50% cut in support. So, look, if the whole thing is a tempest in a teapot, that would be my favorite outcome, right? That would be my favorite outcome. It's just that they have done such a miserable job of making that case, which is a simple case to make. So something here, and these insults to his supporters it hurts. It hurts because I support the guy, right? It hurts because I admire him. It hurts because I was so enthusiastic about all of this stuff. I don't like being called, weak or stupid, because I'm concerned about the things that Bongino and Trump and Bondi and Cash all made a big deal out of when they were commentators. So if you're going to change course on this, and there's no question they've changed course on this, then you need to explain why you're changing course. And that hasn't happened yet. And this is the thing that makes me nuts. Nuts. Just plain. Look, I just want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I don't care if they were. Let's just take the other extreme, right? Because I think the most likely case is it's a form of hysteria where everything was built up, but nevertheless, this stuff did happen. Just take Bill Clinton, for example, right? We know, and there were witnesses, we know he got on the plane a bunch of times. We know there were underage girls on the plane. We know all of that stuff. Does this matter to me? It does matter to me. First of all, one of the girls, or woman now, I guess, basically said that she was raped 3 times a day on Epstein's Island. That matters to me. Is that person telling the truth? I don't know. But this is the heart of the problem. This is the heart of the problem. That person needs to be put under oath and testify. This is the thing that is so annoying to me, is that we're just, if there's no there, then prove it. And if you can't, or if you're unwilling to prove it, then you're telling me that there's something there. No, maybe there's not, but now your incompetence or whatever, or your narcissism or your ego or whatever, is causing enormous damage to the cause I believe in, not to the person I believe in. I don't believe in the person, I believe in the cause. I believe he's an extremely flawed tool of the most noble cause in the history of the world. That's why I support him. But anyway, enough on this subject. Just real quick, Lutheran Carnivore says, I have a similar experience, Bill. I'm a conservative, but I'm not a Trump supporter because pro-lifers betrayed the unborn by opposing bills that would make abortion a crime in many red states with no Democrats in the way. Yep. All right, well, let's move on. Ian Nolan. Bill, here's an interesting one, a political aviation question. That'll get us another hour. A little while ago, you mentioned that our best counter to a China-Taiwan invasion would be submarines. Since then, I've learned that China has built a massive underwater surveillance network off the South China Sea to counter precisely that. But there's another interesting counter by pursuing. They've got their own Chronoplan. We've never seen one used in battle, but it seems like this might be exactly the niche where they're useful. Thoughts? What's our next counter? And a Chronoplan is a ground effect vehicle. There was one called the Sea Monster of the Ural Sea, or whatever it was called. It's essentially a broad, flat wing, and ground effect is what happens when an aircraft is very close to the ground, less than a wingspan off the ground. The air actually gets compressed under the wing, and it provides more lift than you would get. The Caspian Sea Monster, that's what I was looking for. Thanks, John. And so you are able to essentially fly 5-10 feet above the surface of the water, and they're essentially, toys. I guess you could make the case that they're immune to torpedoes, but the beautiful thing about a ship, Ian, is that a ship uses buoyancy. I mean, what is a carrier weigh? Is it 100,000 tons? And so you can load a ton of stuff onto something that uses buoyancy, but a chronoplan, it has to fly. Now, it doesn't require as much power as a airplane that gets out of ground effect, because it gets the extra benefit. But the bottom line is you're still getting it out of the water, so it can only carry so much with it. I'm not so much worried about that. I'm not too worried about their surveillance system either. We've got SOSUS buoys. SOSUS is the I used to know what it meant. It's basically a series of underwater hydrophones, and when we started, we put them across the GI-UK gap, the gap between Greenland and Iceland and the UK, and so on, where we had a line of underwater hydrophones that would listen for Soviet subs coming down from the north to attack NATO convoys resupplying Europe in the event of World War III. We have since put these things over the entire surface of the Earth. The U.S. Navy now knows where everything is. We have a sensor net of these things across the entire planet. Whether or not the Chinese could detect our quietest subs is essentially irrelevant. The question is, could they put weapons on those subs? I don't know. These Virginia class boats are so capable. They're so damn quiet. The scenario for the Taiwan takeover is China launches overwhelming numbers of surface-to-surface missiles from the mainland, takes out all of Taiwan's air defenses, takes out their airfields, takes out their their fortified ground positions. Then they sail an invasion fleet over, disembark the troops, and then overrun Taiwan's defenses. That's the plan. Well, used to be the major weak link in this scenario was getting them across the Straits of Taiwan. What is it, 200 miles? Something like that? Maybe a little less, 100, 150 something. Needless to say, if they do that, they'll be escorted by destroyers, and the destroyers will have anti-air assets and so on. But subs would be there's nothing more helpless than troops on a transport. It's just plain raw vulnerability. You can destroy 5,000 troops at a time with one torpedo. One torpedo can kill 5,000 soldiers. One torpedo can sink God knows how many tanks. Our submarine force is far superior to the Chinese sub force. Far superior. 110 miles, thanks. That's a long way. The English Channel is only 20 miles wide, and obviously Normandy's further than that, but I don't know. I don't know that they could pull it off. I mean, I don't know if they could. When I say I don't know if they could pull it off, if the United States stays out of it. If the United States got fully into it, then I have no doubt we could deny. I have no doubt that the U.S. Navy could prevent that invasion force from getting to Taiwan in strong enough shape to actually be able to, fight a winning land battle after they got ashore. And by the way, it's not just a question of capabilities, not just a question of how many transports they have, or what their sub force is, or what our sub force is, or any of the rest of it. The United States can put troops ashore anywhere in the world, and we're the only people in the world that can do that. And the reason we can do that is because we learned how to do it 80 years ago at a tremendous cost in blood and treasure. We learned how to do amphibious operations in the Pacific in World War II. And when we started at Guadalcanal, we snuck guys in there. We just snuck them in on a dark night, overran the minimal Japanese troops there, and then Japan spent the next 6 months trying to recapture Guadalcanal, and weren't able to do it. And then you start moving into kind of the middle stages of the war. You get to places like Tarawa, where you had a decent working plan, but you didn't account for a freak tide. It's like once every several months you get it's not like it's not predictable, it's just not common. like these neap tides or whatever tides. Well, on the day of the invasion of Tarawa, the tide was considerably lower than we thought it would be, and so our transports can't get the guys to the beach. They have to wade through 700 yards of chest deep water, and they just get massacred. Um, so we got that right. One of the things that we did, and that really almost never gets talked to about, it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this series on the Navy. But one of the unsung heroes of the Navy in the war on the Pacific were the UDT guys, the underwater demolition teams. These guys would go in and they would wear flippers, a mask, and a bathing suit, and they would go in within rifle fire of the ground, and they would go down there. They didn't have scuba. Scuba hadn't been invented yet. They would go down and they would plant explosive charges on the coral reefs to blow open holes where the landing craft would come. All of this stuff, and then you got to coordinate the naval bombardment. Oh, John Pershing points out that he often had a knife as well. That's true. So this whole amphibious operation thing is something that we've not only got right in World War II, but we've been practicing every single month since then. It's fun to drive down to San Diego from Los Angeles. Every now and then you'll get lucky when you go through Camp Pendleton. Every now and then, it's very rare, but every now and then you will see the Marines invading California again. And it's doctrine. You know, you can't learn that, you can't get that right the first time. You know, you can't get that right the first time. You're going to make tremendous mistakes. You can read about these things. For example, one of the things that we learned in the Pacific was we learned combat loading. Right? When you would load a ship, you would, in the beginning of the war, we would load it the most efficient way possible to maximize the amount of cargo. You know, you put the big stuff in first or whatever the case may be, and you just pack as much in there. But when we started actually getting into the actual amphibious operations, what we found was the stuff that we needed first had to be loaded last. And so we could get it off first. Things like that are lessons that are not learned easily. So this is one invasion. We had to, I don't know how many amphibious invasions we had in the Pacific. I want to say it's at least 10. At least 10. You know, Tarawa, Pelelius, Saipan, Tinian, Guam, Iwo, Okinawa, got better and better and better at it. And all of the preparation that has to happen, the softening up of the defenses and the shore bombardments, and then on the day of the actual invasion, you've got air cover, you've got close air support. China's had no experience doing any of this stuff. China's army hasn't fought a war since Korea. No, actually, they fought a little bit against Vietnam. But I'm not convinced, man. Kirk's Bamboo Bazooka says that's why Loadmaster is a real job. Loadmaster is probably the single most important job during an amphibious invasion. I'd say I'd rather have a great Loadmaster than a great general, because you can't do anything if your ammunition and your water is buried at the hull of a ship. And you also have to figure out how to spread that out among a number of different ships in case you lose one. You know, if you put all of your tank ammunition on one transport, let's say, and that goes down, then you're boned. So you get the idea. P72017 says, "Ooh, Bill, when I first met my blog partner's uncle was a Palawan survivor." Hey, Fiery Waco says, "Lived on Guam when I was a kid. It was paradise for 10 years old." Yeah, it's amazing. I'd like to see Tinian. I'd like to go to Tinian and see the actual airstrip from where they launched the atomic bombs. The two pits, they had concrete holes in the ground. They put the bomb in the pit, then they taxi the B-29 over the thing, crank it up into the bomb bay. Those two pits are there, and they've got like a little plexiglass thing. But I would like to see Tinian. Yeah, and we don't know. We don't, Eric says China can have all the ammo and weapons and ships they like. We don't count for much if they aren't any good at using them. Um, for example, China has a naval variant of the flanker, and you see all these videos of these, you know, these fighter jets getting launched off of Chinese carriers, two slope deck carriers, and they've got a flat deck carrier now, although they can't get the electromagnetic catapults to work. Last I heard. So you see them launching jets and they're touching the deck and they do all the things that look like an American thing and they show it to their people and everybody cheers. Look, we're just as good as America. We got guys in yellow jackets, you know, touching the deck and off goes the fighter. Then I talked to my fighter pilot friends and they say that those planes are not carrying any munitions and they're carrying, you know, 2/3 of their fuel load because they just can't get off the deck otherwise. I'm just going to call Dave Area 51 from now on. Does China go with a missile attack and try to bend the simulation to their favor, or is it too risky for them? Every wargaming of the Taiwan invasion I've ever seen begins with a massive, massive, massive strike of conventional missiles. China's just got endless numbers of them right on the coast across from Taiwan, and they just launch these just this overwhelming wave of missiles, take out the Taiwanese Air Force bases, take out the Taiwanese air defenses, take out their land-based missiles and all the rest of it. I would like to know personally whether or not Taiwan has the ability to hit Three Gorges Dam. Because that's China's great strategic weakness. There are something like it's an astonishing number. It's something like 400 million Chinese downstream of the Three Gorges Dam that would be drowned in the space of the first 2 or 3 hours. And if my country is being invaded by China, I'm hitting that dam. So there you go. Moving on. Roadrunner. Capital G Geek. That's it. Okay, hooray. Greetings, friend Bill. Hey, Roadrunner. Good to see you. 2 questions. First, did my newly registered test account get a black dot? Yes, you got a black dot, and you've been a data point for us. I said to the developer, we had one guy do it. I know him. I trust him. He did it very carefully, followed all the instructions, and it did not take the credit card information. So I've got a message waiting for me. I haven't read it yet from him, basically asking, I think, to do another test. So I think Natasha's coming in, and we will we'll try again. It's really embarrassing, but thank you for doing it, and it was an important data point for us. Second, an actual political question. Many on the left are calling for violence against American government employees, ICE, Border Patrol, Republican politicians, etc. Recently, a Georgetown professor tried to incite violence against the United States military bases. Progressives have no problem aggressively attacking and or prosecuting conservatives using the DOJ and other judicial misconduct, J6 protesters. Attacking government employees sure sounds like insurrection-y to me. Am I a bad conservative if I wish that we would arrest, jail, and prosecute these anti-American a-holes as aggressively as the Democrats do? No, you're a good American. Remember, conservative speech is violence. Progressive violence is speech. That's exactly right. This is such a nuanced kind of thing, because these people are so open about talking about their violence and their they're gonna, if I see somebody wearing any alligator Alcatraz merchandise, I'm gonna punch him in the face. Like, no, you won't. No, you won't. You might go up to them and call them a name, but you're not gonna punch them in the face. And if you do, you're gonna get decked out. So on one level, they are dangerous. But and this is one of the things about Antifa, because Antifa's been around for a while now, And when I first saw Antifa, I thought, oh, this is genuinely serious, and it is serious. But every time I see Antifa in an actual conflict, when they're actually opposed by people who are ready to fight, they either get knocked down real fast or run away, because they're posers. They're cosplayers. They're cosplaying. For those of you not familiar with it, that's costume role playing in the real world. They're trying to be tough guys when they're, completely beta, and they get out there and they act real tough so long as nobody actually stands up to them. But you get that. So what we're seeing in LA and things like that, there's like a $50,000 reward for somebody who threw rocks at ice, and I think, or maybe that's for somebody who actually shot at ice. Bottom line is, man, not only is ice out there doing the job, but again, this goes to what we talked about earlier. I mean, this big beautiful bill has multiplied ICE's budget by a factor of 20. Damn, man, that sounds serious. So the people that seem to be bluffing are Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom. They're making big loud noises and demanding that these ICE things leave town, but they're not leaving town. On one level there's the I'm trying to say here. I just, it looks like Homan, of all the people in the cabinet, Homan is the most resolute and defiantly clear. I don't imagine you could have a better person than Homan in charge of this operation. He doesn't fear the criminals, and he doesn't fear the moral argument. He just doesn't buy it. He just doesn't care. And I'm real happy with him. And thanks for that link about the mini torpedo. And I think we're gonna keep going, man. I think we're gonna just keep pushing them out. Okay, last question, which I'm told I will never answer. Capital G Geek, greetings from the swamps of Northern Virginia. Bridget Macron is accused of being trans. A court recently dismissed her suit against someone making that accusation. Here's a picture showing that her ring finger appears to be longer than her index finger. Well, mine is too, so I guess I'm trans. Any comments? The evidence for this is actually pretty good, I think. And in the comment section, they were saying, "Oh, I'm never going to take the question about whether or not Big Mike is actually Michelle Obama." Look, I put. I don't know. I mean, I just genuinely don't know. But this is not something I would just plain rule out. I haven't. Not only have I not done a deep dive on this, I haven't really looked at it at all. But some of the things I've seen were pretty compelling. I saw a picture of Barack Obama with somebody who looked like a male Michelle Obama when they were much younger, and I don't know if that's a real picture or not. If it is, it's pretty compelling. And what I find interesting is that both of these people are far left progressives, and they should be. You would think they would be cheering this. Ultimately, see, this is the thing. Ultimately, about this kind of stuff, I really don't care. Honestly, I don't care. I just don't like being lied to. It's just that simple. I don't care. I just don't like being lied to, and so Macron can do whatever he wants to, but if he's lying to people, then Why? Right? Aren't you the team that's saying that trans women are women? I mean, if that's the case, why don't you do it? I kind of agree with Eric. I think most of this stuff is just a place to let off excess steam. But yeah, there's just enough evidence there to make a case if you don't hear the counter evidence, and I don't know. I frankly think it's um, you know, a mildly amusing waste of time. But beyond that, I don't think there's really much to it that I can see. So, I suppose it's possible, and if it's true, I don't really much care. I just don't like being lied to. That's about it, I think. Hey, ho, ho, we got through all the questions. Thank you for the pass on the second one, Eric. And 2:30, that's not bad. Okay, so that'll do it for this. We continue to work on the plugin, and I'll probably ask you find stalwart people again to do it, because we had 15 people sign up. They all got membership pages at billwhittle.com, and none of their credit card information was taken. So it's just acutely embarrassing for me, and also has kept us without any new income for months now. And we're just running out of time. So I'm working like crazy with Black Dot is bad. A black dot on Recurly means that we got your email and name, but no credit card information. Green dot is good. And since we've had the plugin, we've had a couple of green dots, but mostly black dots. Why? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But anyway, so this show is made possible by the members at billwhittle.com who came to us at a time when our plugin was working, and we'd like to have new ones. So Mr. Wispy says he just got producing member payment. Thank you very much for the producing membership. It's processing stuff that got there before. Once it's in Recurly, it's great. It's just getting it to there is a turning into a Chinese calculus problem here. That'll do it. But anyway, thanks again for our members. Thanks for everybody else for being here. It's great to see everybody. Thanks for the super chats as usual. And I guess we will see you guys Monday for the Stratosphere Studio. And I will try to have some more tests on the Navy stuff. Because it'd be fun to be able to, if we can get a trailer for Taffy 3, then it gives us some options that we don't have otherwise. So anyway, that's it for tonight. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you Monday night here on the Stratosphere Studio.